The mountain winds howled outside Marcus Thompson's cabin as he added another log to his fireplace. The weather report had warned about the incoming blizzard, but this storm was worse than anything he'd seen in his 5 years living here. The wooden walls of his small home creaked under the assault of the fierce wind, and snow piled higher by the minute outside his frost-covered windows. Marcus didn't mind the isolation. After losing Sarah 3 years ago, the quiet of the mountains had become his comfort. Here, among the towering pines and winter storms, he found peace in the simple routine of survival: chopping wood, maintaining his solar panels, and keeping his small greenhouse running. The cabin was well stocked for the winter. Marcus had learned early on never to take chances with mountain weather. The pantry was full, the generator was maintained, and he had enough firewood to last through 3 storms this size. He settled into his favorite chair with a book, the one Sarah had given him before she passed away, letting the crackling fire warm his feet. The crash against his door made him jump. At first, he thought it was just the wind throwing a branch, but then came the scratching sounds, desperate, weak, but definitely something trying to get in. Marcus grabbed his flashlight. In 5 years, he'd never had a bear try to break in, but there was always a first time. The pounding came again, weaker this time. It didn't sound like a bear. It sounded almost human. Marcus rushed to the door. If someone was stuck out in this storm, they wouldn't survive long. The temperature had dropped well below freezing hours ago. He pulled the heavy wooden door open against the wind's resistance. A figure stumbled in with a blast of snow, falling to his floor in a heap of strange, shimmering fabric. Marcus quickly pushed the door shut against the howling wind. When he turned back, his flashlight beam revealed something that made him freeze in place. The person lying on his floor wasn't human. Their skin was a pale blue color that had nothing to do with the cold. Long, silvery hair spread out around a face that was almost human but not quite. The eyes were too large, the features too angular. The stranger was clearly female, dressed in what looked like a skin-tight suit made of material that seemed to shift colors in his flashlight beam. The alien woman's eyes opened, revealing pupils that reflected his flashlight like a cat's. When she saw him, pure terror filled her face. She scrambled backward until she hit the wall, making strange clicking sounds that had to be speech. Marcus slowly raised his hands, taking a step back to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly, knowing she probably couldn't understand but hoping his tone would help. "You're safe here." The alien woman's eyes darted between Marcus and the door, but even as she pressed herself against the wall, her body shivered violently. Whatever her suit was made of, it wasn't enough protection against the brutal mountain cold. Moving slowly, Marcus picked up the thick wool blanket from his chair. He held it out to her, then set it on the floor and stepped back again. The alien watched him with those strange reflective eyes, still trembling but looking more confused than terrified now. After a long moment, she reached out and grabbed the blanket, quickly wrapping it around herself. Her shivering slowly began to ease as the warmth from the fireplace reached her. Marcus stayed where he was, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. Outside, the storm raged on, but in his small cabin, 2 beings from different worlds found themselves in an unexpected standoff. One seeking shelter from the cold, the other offering it, both equally unsure what would happen next. The minutes ticked by slowly as Marcus and his unexpected guest remained in their cautious standoff. The alien woman had stopped shivering, but her eyes never left him, watching his every move with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The storm outside seemed to grow stronger, rattling the windows with increasing fury. Marcus knew he had to do something. She might be warming up, but she'd need water and food soon. Moving deliberately, he walked to his kitchen area, making sure to stay where she could see him. He filled a clean glass with water and grabbed some dried fruit from his pantry. Simple things that hopefully wouldn't upset an alien stomach. He placed them on the floor halfway between them and backed away. The alien's eyes moved between him and the offerings, her head tilting slightly in a way that seemed almost bird-like. After several long moments, she slowly moved forward, still clutching the blanket around her shoulders. She picked up the glass first, studying it carefully. Marcus mined drinking, lifting an imaginary glass to his lips. The alien watched him, then cautiously sniffed the water. Her eyes widened slightly, and she took a small sip. Finding it safe, she quickly drank the rest. The dried fruit proved more challenging to explain. The alien picked up an apple slice, turning it over in her long, six-fingered hand. Marcus picked up one himself and ate it, making exaggerated movements to show it was food. She watched him carefully, then mimicked his actions. Her expression changed to what Marcus could only interpret as surprise, followed by something that might have been a smile. As she ate, Marcus noticed she was drawing something in the dust on his floor. He grabbed his notebook and a pen from the nearby table, offering them to her. She took them cautiously, then began to draw with surprising skill. First, she drew what looked like a sleek spacecraft, then added rough weather patterns around it. She pointed to the drawings, then to herself, making downward spiraling motions with her hand. Marcus nodded. She was trying to tell him she'd crashed in the storm. He pointed to himself and said clearly, "Marcus." Then he wrote his name under the drawing. The alien watched him intently, then pointed to herself and made a series of musical clicking sounds. She attempted to write in his notebook, but her symbols were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. He tried to repeat her sounds and failed completely, making her do something that sounded remarkably like a laugh. Instead of trying again, she pointed to the window where aurora lights were faintly visible through the storm. Marcus understood. "Aurora," he said, pointing to her. She tilted her head, considering, then nodded. As the night wore on, they developed a simple system of gestures and drawings. Aurora drew her ship again, this time adding more details and what looked like damage markers. Marcus understood she needed help, but with the storm still raging, there was nothing they could do yet. When Aurora began to show signs of tiredness, Marcus gathered some blankets and made a comfortable spot for her near the fire, then retreated to his chair to give her space. She watched him settle in before finally lying down herself, still wrapped in the first blanket he'd given her. Just before she fell asleep, Aurora made a gentle clicking sound and gestured toward him. Though he couldn't understand the words, the meaning was clear enough. "Thank you." The morning light filtered through the snow-covered windows as Marcus woke up in his chair. Aurora was already awake, sitting cross-legged by the dying fire. She had his notebook open on her lap and was drawing something with intense concentration. Marcus quietly added wood to the fire, trying not to disturb her. When he glanced at her drawings, he saw she had filled several pages with 2 columns of symbols. On one side were her strange angular writings, on the other were simple English words: fire, water, food, cold. She looked up at him and pointed to the fire, then to the word she had written. "Fire," she said carefully, her voice making the word sound musical. Marcus nodded encouragingly, and her face lit up with what was definitely a smile. They spent the morning like this, with Aurora pointing to objects around the cabin and Marcus teaching her their names. She learned remarkably fast, though some sounds gave her trouble. She wrote everything down in both languages, occasionally making notes in her own script that Marcus couldn't understand. Around midday, Aurora stood up and walked to the window. The storm had weakened but hadn't passed. She made gestures that Marcus now understood meant her ship, then pointed to herself and the door. She wanted to check on her crash site. Marcus shook his head and tried to explain using their growing language of gestures and simple words. "Storm, dangerous," he said, pointing to the swirling snow. "Wait." Aurora's large eyes narrowed as she studied the weather. She drew quickly in the notebook, a simple map showing they were high on the mountain. Then she drew her ship lower down, adding arrows to show wind patterns. Marcus understood. She was worried her ship might be buried in snow. To distract her, Marcus pulled out an old tablet he kept for emergencies. The battery was low, but it would work for a while. He pulled up a simple language learning app he'd once downloaded for a trip to Mexico. Aurora's eyes widened when she saw the screen. She reached for the tablet hesitantly, then began tapping through the basic English lessons with incredible speed. Her fingers flew across the screen as she absorbed new words and grammar rules. Every few minutes, she would look up and try a new phrase. "I understand more now," she said slowly, her clicking accent making the words sound like music. "Your language. Simple patterns." Marcus couldn't help but laugh at hearing English called simple. He showed her a page of Sarah's old crossword puzzles, pointing out all the complicated rules and exceptions. Aurora studied them with fascination, making more notes in her angular script. By evening, they could have basic conversations. Aurora explained that her people, who she called Lumini, learned languages differently than humans. They could recognize patterns very quickly once they understood the basic rules. But she seemed frustrated by something else. "Humans," she said carefully, "show feelings. In face, voice. Hard to understand." She pointed to Marcus's smile. "This means happy, but also sad sometimes." Marcus nodded, realizing that reading human emotions must be as alien to her as her clicking language was to him. He began teaching her about smiles, frowns, and the countless ways humans showed their feelings without words. Aurora took notes on everything, treating human emotions like a fascinating new science to study. The next morning brought clearer skies, though the wind still howled around the cabin. Aurora sat at Marcus's small table, surrounded by books she pulled from his shelves. Her ability to read English had grown remarkably overnight, and she devoured everything from his old survival guides to Sarah's collection of romance novels. "Your stories," Aurora said, holding up one of the romance books. "They show humans feeling so much. My people think this makes humans dangerous." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We watch your broadcasts. Wars, fighting, anger. We think humans cannot control emotions." Marcus understood now. Her fear when she first saw him made more sense. He pulled out an old photo album and showed her pictures of his life with Sarah. Their wedding day, hiking trips, quiet moments in this very cabin. Aurora studied each photo intently. "These show different truth," she said softly. "Gentle emotions. Why do you live alone here?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he turned to the last pages of the album, showing Sarah in the hospital. Aurora's large eyes widened in understanding. "Grief," she said, using a word she'd learned from her morning reading. "You feel grief, but you helped me without question." She made a note in her angular writing. "My people are wrong about humans." Marcus asked about her people, and Aurora used his tablet to show him. She pulled up a drawing program and sketched her home. Massive crystalline cities floating on what looked like clouds. She explained that the Lumini valued logic and control above all else. They saw emotions as primitive, dangerous things to be managed and suppressed. "But you," she gestured to the cabin around them, "live with technology and emotions together. Simple life, but not primitive. We do not understand this balance." She showed him more drawings of her people's beliefs about humans. They thought Earth was a chaotic place of constant conflict, based largely on entertainment broadcasts they'd intercepted. Action movies and news reports had convinced them that humans were too unstable for contact. "Your movies, news, they show loudest emotions, biggest conflicts," Aurora explained. "We never saw this." She gestured to the quiet cabin, the books, the photos of happy moments. "Never saw humans being peaceful." As they talked, Marcus noticed Aurora's own emotions showing more clearly. Her facial expressions, though subtle, were becoming more human-like. She seemed fascinated by simple things. The way he hummed while making tea, how he laughed at old memories, even how he gently cared for the plants in his small greenhouse. "Perhaps," she said, watching him water the plants, Emotions not make humans weak, make you stronger in different way. A sharp beeping sound woke Marcus in the middle of the night. Aurora was already up, holding a small device that must have been hidden in her suit. Her face showed worry as she studied its glowing display. "My people," she said quickly, "they search for me. Think I am in danger." She pointed to the device's screen, which showed multiple moving dots approaching their location. "They see 2 life signs here. Think you are holding me prisoner." Marcus felt his stomach sink. He remembered what Aurora had said about how her people viewed humans as dangerous, emotional creatures prone to violence. A lone human in an isolated cabin wouldn't look good to them. "We must contact them," Aurora said, pulling more equipment from hidden pockets in her suit. "But communications," she gestured to show something broken. The crash had damaged her long-range communicator. The dots on her device were getting closer. Aurora's hands moved quickly, trying to repair her communicator with pieces from Marcus's old radio. Her normally calm face showed clear signs of stress. She was learning human emotions a little too well. "If they come here," she explained while working, "they will follow protocol. Assume worst about human presence." Her large eyes met his. "They might hurt you too, to protect me." Marcus understood. The Lumini would see exactly what they expected to see: a primitive human holding one of their people captive in a remote location. Everything about his isolated lifestyle would confirm their prejudices. The wind picked up outside, and Aurora's device showed the approaching dots slowing down. The storm was returning, buying them time. But it also meant her people might become more worried about her safety. "Need to show them truth," Aurora said firmly. She pointed to Marcus's tablet. "Record everything. Show them how you helped me. Show them they are wrong about humans." They spent the next hour documenting everything, Aurora speaking in her clicking language to explain how Marcus had saved her from the storm, given her shelter, helped her learn his language. She showed the books, the photos, the peaceful way he lived. But when they tried to transmit the message, the storm interfered. Aurora's makeshift repairs weren't strong enough to punch through the interference. The dots on her device kept coming, slower now because of the weather, but still approaching. "Storm is problem," Aurora said, "but also gives us time." She looked at the tablet thoughtfully. "Need to show them bigger truth, not just about you, about all humans. Show them why they are wrong about Earth." Marcus nodded. They had maybe a day before the search party arrived. One day to change the minds of an entire alien civilization about humanity. Aurora worked through the night, trying different frequencies on her repaired communicator. Marcus helped by connecting it to his solar batteries, giving her device more power. Finally, just before dawn, they got a signal. The screen lit up with strange symbols, and Aurora began speaking rapidly in her clicking language. Marcus watched her face change from relief to frustration as she argued with whoever was on the other end. "They do not believe," she said, switching to English. "Say I am under influence. Think you control my mind with human emotions." She made a sound that was almost like a human sigh. "Must show proof." Marcus had an idea. He grabbed his camera, an old but sturdy device he used to document wildlife. Over the years, he'd recorded countless moments of peaceful interaction with mountain animals, feeding deer, helping injured birds, even gently relocating a bear cub that had wandered too close to his cabin. Aurora's eyes lit up when she saw the footage. She quickly connected the camera to her communicator, sending the videos along with her own recordings of their peaceful interactions. She added the photos of Marcus's life with Sarah, showing years of gentle human emotions. "Look," she clicked rapidly into her communicator, translating for Marcus as she spoke. "Humans live in balance with nature. They feel deeply but control emotions when needed. This one lives alone but helped me without question. Your data about humans is incomplete." The response came back quickly, more angry clicks and flashing symbols. Aurora's shoulders slumped. "They say, not enough proof. Want to know why you live alone if humans need connection. She looked at Marcus sadly. They think you are damaged, dangerous. Marcus took the communicator. He couldn't speak their language, but he could show them something. He pulled out Sarah's medical records, her death certificate, the grief counseling papers, documents showing how humans dealt with loss through healing rather than isolation. Aurora translated as she sent each document. He chose mountain peace to heal, not hide. Keeps memories, feels pain, but helps others. This is human strength. They feel loss but don't lose ability to care. The silence from the communicator stretched on. Then, slowly, new symbols appeared. Aurora's face brightened as she read them. They are surprised. Say they never considered grief as positive force. Never understood how humans use painful emotions to help others. She smiled at Marcus. They want to learn more. But a warning followed. The search party was still coming. Protocol required them to verify Aurora's safety in person. They had bought some time and open minds, but the real test was still ahead. The storm cleared enough by midday for Marcus to hear the humming sound. It started as a low vibration, then grew stronger until the windows rattled slightly. Aurora's tracking device showed 3 dots now very close to the cabin. They come in diplomatic vessel, Aurora explained, watching the dots approach. Your messages made them curious, but still careful. She touched Marcus's arm. Let me speak first. Stay calm. The humming peaked, and Marcus saw them through his window. 3 tall, blue-skinned figures in shimmering suits walking through the snow. They carried no visible weapons, but their movements were stiff and cautious. Aurora opened the door before they could knock. She spoke rapidly in their clicking language, gesturing to Marcus and the cabin. The 3 visitors entered, their large eyes taking in everything. Marcus noticed they all carried devices similar to Aurora's translator. The tallest one spoke, their words instantly translated by their device. We are the diplomatic assessment team. Our scans showed no weapons or restraint devices in this dwelling. Explain how you achieved peaceful coexistence. Aurora smiled, a very human expression that seemed to startle her people. There was nothing to achieve. Marcus helped me because it was right. Humans make such choices naturally. The team spread out, examining everything with their scanners. They seemed particularly interested in Marcus's photos and books. One of them picked up the tablet where Aurora had been learning English. You learned their language in days, the second diplomat clicked, and adapted their emotional expressions. Are you compromised? I am enhanced, Aurora replied firmly. Understanding emotions helps communication. Watch. She turned to Marcus and smiled, then frowned, then showed surprise. Humans read these signals instantly. It is not primitive, it is advanced communication. The 3rd diplomat was studying Marcus's greenhouse. This human maintains complex systems alone, yet chooses simple methods. Why? Marcus spoke slowly, letting their translators work. Because some things need human care, not just technology. Plants grow better with attention, like relationships between people or species. The diplomats huddled together, clicking rapidly. Their translators were off, but Marcus could see their faces showing hints of emotion, just like Aurora's had begun to do. The diplomatic team spent hours reviewing Aurora's recordings and Marcus's documentation. They were particularly fascinated by his collection of books, especially the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Your entertainment broadcasts misled us, the lead diplomat admitted through the translator. We thought they were real records of human behavior. Never considered concept of imagination. Aurora helped explain how humans use stories to explore ideas and emotions safely. She showed them Sarah's romance novels alongside Marcus's survival guides, demonstrating how humans balanced emotional expression with practical knowledge. See how they label fiction clearly. Aurora pointed out, humans understand difference between stories and truth. They create imaginary conflicts to learn about real emotions. The 2nd diplomat was studying Marcus's medical records and grief counseling documents. Your health providers encourage emotional expression, yet teach control. This contradicts our data about human instability. Marcus explained grief counseling to them, how humans learn to process strong emotions rather than suppress them. The diplomats took extensive notes, their faces showing increasing signs of what looked like confusion and curiosity. Your isolation here, the third diplomat noted, examining Marcus's solar panels and communication equipment. We assumed primitive exile, but you maintain advanced systems while choosing simpler methods. Why? Technology should help life, not control it, Marcus answered. Like emotions, tools to use wisely, not enemies to fight. The lead diplomat made a series of rapid clicks to their companions. Their translators were off, but their body language had become noticeably less rigid. They moved more naturally around the cabin, occasionally touching things. The wood walls, the woolen blankets, the plants in the greenhouse. We have made serious error, the lead diplomat finally announced. Based entire species assessment on entertainment and isolated incidents. Never studied daily human life. They turned to Aurora. Your accident has revealed significant oversight in our protocols. Aurora smiled. Perhaps it was not accident. Perhaps universe has wisdom we don't understand. The diplomats' translators struggled with this concept, but Marcus noticed their expressions changing. They were learning to show emotions, just as Aurora had. The diplomatic team gathered in Marcus's living room the next morning. The storm had finally passed, leaving the mountain covered in fresh snow that sparkled under the rising sun. Their ship was now visible through the trees, a sleek silver craft barely larger than a small car. Aurora, the lead diplomat said, you must return with us. Your research data about humans is unprecedented. The council needs your direct testimony. Aurora stood by the window, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. She had spent the night reviewing her notes and recordings, adding detailed observations about human behavior and emotions. I request permission to stay, she said firmly. Humans need proper diplomatic contact, not distant observation. Marcus has shown that direct interaction reveals truths our scans missed. The diplomats clicked rapidly among themselves. Their faces now showed clear concern. They had learned to express emotions in just one day of watching Aurora and Marcus interact. Unprecedented request, the second diplomat noted. No Lumini has ever volunteered for extended contact with other species. Especially not. They paused, searching for the right word. Emotional species. That prejudice is exactly why I must stay, Aurora argued. Look how much we learned in 3 days. Our entire assessment of human civilization was wrong because we feared their emotions. Marcus, who had been quietly making breakfast, spoke up. Your people value knowledge, right? Real understanding comes from experience, not just observation. Aurora learned our language, our emotions, our ways, and we learned from her too. The lead diplomat studied them both. You suggest emotional understanding this form of intelligence we have ignored. Not ignored, Aurora corrected. Feared. We call ourselves advanced, but we hide from whole range of experience. Humans embrace it, learn from it, grow stronger. The third diplomat raised a counter-argument. Council will say emotions make humans unpredictable, dangerous. Look at Marcus, Aurora gestured around the cabin. He channels emotions into care, for plants, animals, others in need. Is that dangerous? Or is it kind of intelligence we never considered? The mountain winds howled outside Marcus Thompson's cabin as he added another log to his fireplace. The weather report had warned about the incoming blizzard, but this storm was worse than anything he'd seen in his 5 years living here. The wooden walls of his small home creaked under the assault of the fierce wind, and snow piled higher by the minute outside his frost-covered windows. Marcus didn't mind the isolation. After losing Sarah 3 years ago, the quiet of the mountains had become his comfort. Here, among the towering pines and winter storms, he found peace in the simple routine of survival. Chopping wood, maintaining his solar panels, and keeping his small greenhouse running. The cabin was well stocked for the winter. Marcus had learned early on never to take chances with mountain weather. The pantry was full, the generator was maintained, and he had enough firewood to last through 3 storms this size. He settled into his favorite chair with a book, the one Sarah had given him before she passed away, letting the crackling fire warm his feet. The crash against his door made him jump. At first, he thought it was just the wind throwing a branch. But then came the scratching sounds, desperate, weak, but definitely something trying to get in. Marcus grabbed his flashlight. In 5 years, he'd never had a bear try to break in, but there was always a first time. The pounding came again, weaker this time. It didn't sound like a bear. It sounded almost human. Marcus rushed to the door. If someone was stuck out in this storm, they wouldn't survive long. The temperature had dropped well below freezing hours ago. He pulled the heavy wooden door open against the wind's resistance. A figure stumbled in with a blast of snow, falling to his floor in a heap of strange, shimmering fabric. Marcus quickly pushed the door shut against the howling wind. When he turned back, his flashlight beam revealed something that made him freeze in place. The person lying on his floor wasn't human. Their skin was a pale blue color that had nothing to do with the cold. Long, silvery hair spread out around a face that was almost human but not quite. The eyes were too large, the features too angular. The stranger was clearly female, dressed in what looked like a skin-tight suit made of material that seemed to shift colors in his flashlight beam. The alien woman's eyes opened, revealing pupils that reflected his flashlight like a cat's. When she saw him, pure terror filled her face. She scrambled backward until she hit the wall, making strange clicking sounds that had to be speech. Marcus slowly raised his hands, taking a step back to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly, knowing she probably couldn't understand but hoping his tone would help. "You're safe here."